Welcome to this new episode of the Impact X podcast, where we're talking about how the best leaders create 10 times the impact with half the drama. And today we're with one of my favorite thought leaders that talks about drama, David Emerald. He's the creator-in-chief of the Center of Empowerment Dynamic and co-founder of the Bainbridge Leadership Center. He's the author of one of my favorite books, The Power of TED, the Empower Dynamic. It's an amazing tool. And he also just recently wrote his second book, Self-Leadership and the Three Vital Questions, Transforming Workplace Drama. And guys, we talk about drama at the Growth Institute all the time. David knows drama. And what I was telling David before we started is I believe the best books are the ones that teach you something or put in paper something you already know, but you kind of don't know how to grasp. And when I understood the power of TED, his diagram that we're going to learn today, it just changed everything. It just put in perspective so many things that happened. Let me just close my introduction. David has a master's degree in applied behavioral science from Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio. And today he lives in Bainbridge Island in Washington on the Pacific Coast with his wife and business partner, Dana. All right, David, thank you very much. Super excited. You've changed my life.
Thanks, Daniel. Thank you. I'm so delighted to be here and have this conversation with you.
All right, so let's talk about drama first. So and by the way, when at the Growth Institute, we said we help you scale impact and reduce drama, people said like, what is drama? And I was like, it's everything that happens in your company. So why did you decide to attack drama? And how do you start seeing this drama in companies?
Well, a couple of things, Dana, that come up for me. One is I want to go back to what you said in your introduction, that I really have to credit Dr. Stephen Cartman, who first articulated the drama triangle, because, and we'll go more deeply into it, but the drama triangle is made up of the roles of victim, persecutor, and rescuer. And when I first saw that, just like you described, he put on paper, so to speak, what I call a blinding flash of the obvious. As soon as I saw that, it was like, oh, that explains so much of my life. And this goes back almost 30 years of my experience. And so as it relates to what I'll share with you what I mean by drama here in a moment. Well, let's talk about drama in the workplace, because I think when people hear the word drama, I think most people initially go to TV, movies, drama that is part of our entertainment. And the entertainment is almost always made up of the three roles, by the way, of victim, persecutor, and rescuer on some form or another. But when it comes to the workplace, I mean, to me, it's anything that is drawing away time and energy that could be more creatively and productively spent serving clients, co-creating, etc. And so things like gossip or rumors, or frankly, anytime someone is complaining or we're complaining, we are in that victim role. We're occupying that victim role. And so, excluding others. One of my favorites is, which actually comes from a classic Peter Block book around organizational politics, is that drama happens when the real meeting does not happen in the meeting room. When the real meeting happens either before the meeting or after the meeting or during the break, rather than it being authentic, above board conversations. So drama takes on a lot of different forms.
Interesting. How were you in your life? What was happening in your life when you heard this make so much sense? Because sometimes the student have to be ready. So tell me about your life experience, that when this happened, you said, this is so important, I have to write about it.
Well, I'm delighted to share what I call the story behind the story, and I'll make it relatively short. But so you've read The Power of TED, just for listeners. You know that it's a story about a character named David who meets a character named Ted on the beach, and then later is joined by Ted's protege, Sophia. And in the book, David is at the beach contemplating three events in his life. One is the passing away of his father at a very young age. The second is that he and his wife were trying to start a family. and it wasn't working, found out he was infertile. And as a result of that, his marriage dissolved. Well, those three events are all autobiographical, that those all happened within an 18-month period in my life. And so at the time, one of the things I did was I did some work with a therapist, which I'm a big fan of, working with counselors, coaches, psychotherapists. And she introduced me to the drama triangle. And it was that blinding flash of the obvious. And I'd been working with her for, I don't know, 3 or 4 months. And one morning I have a morning process of, in my own way, contemplation, a lot of times journaling. And I was in this contemplative space, and I said to the God of my understanding, I said, okay, I'm ready to surrender my victim stance in the world, but I need to know what's the opposite of victim. And immediately, Daniel, the word creator came crashing into my mind. And it was another, I won't say it was a blinding flash of the obvious, but it was a personal epiphany that that I sat with for a number of years. And I would go through some periods where, frankly, I would forget about the experience, and then something would happen, and it would come back up to my awareness. And so I started to play around with, well, if creator is the opposite, or what I now call the antidote to the victim, is there an opposite to the persecutor? Is there an opposite to the rescuer? And fast forward to about 18 years ago, and I was doing some work at the University of Notre Dame, debriefing a 360-degree feedback instrument. And this gentleman came into our meeting, and in the course of the conversation, he said, you know, people come into my office and they're just such victims. And just a couple months before that, I had come across an old journal where I played around with alternate roles. And so I ended up sharing it with him. And it was because of that, and a subsequent conversation I had with Donna, my partner, who's a master certified coach. And she's the one that said, is that original work? I said, oh no, Cartman's drama triangle has been around for years. She said, no, the alternative, is that original? I said, yes. And she's the one that said, you've got to write that down.
Interesting. All
So
right.
that's the story behind the story.
You had all these issues, and in your own discovery that
Right.
came in. So Vern always tells me this, and I've been using it a lot because it's happening to me with Impact X precisely, is we teach what we need the most. Impact X is precisely the model that I need for me to be a better CEO and really build a better company. Indeed, at the Growth Institute, we say our most important product is our own company. We won't be able to teach to anyone how to do a great company, and if we don't have a great company internally. So very interesting that this came about the same. All right. So you get a victim, right? It comes to you, and they said, I have this problem. I cannot fix the problem. You rescue me. What do you do? How do you recommend a leader to act, and how to not rescue their employee?
Yeah. Well, before I do that, because of the great question, and I will do my best to answer it. I think it'd be useful for listeners to hear the alternative that emerged with the empowerment dynamic. So again, the antidote to the role of victim is the role of creator. And as a creator, we envision outcomes, we go after outcomes, we create outcomes, and we choose our response to what's going on in our experience. The antidote, or the opposite of the persecutor role, is the role of challenger, and challengers call forth learning and growth in us. And they can be conscious, they can be things that it could be a person, it could be a condition, it could be a circumstance that calls forth learning and growth. And then the supporting role is, rather than rescuing, is being a coach. So now to your question, if someone comes to me, as you set it up, says, I've got a problem, what do you think I should do? The mantra that I used to assign in executive coaching, and I'll share, is the mantra is to ask first, tell second. Ask first, tell second. And let me illustrate that. So let's say you're a direct report of mine. You come to me, you lay out the issue, maybe ask you a few questions so that I'm clear about the issue. The traditional model of leadership, of management, which assumes that the manager should have the answer, would be to tell first, ask second, which would sound something like, well, Daniel, I think you should do A, B, C, and D. What have you thought of? Right? And the mantra reversing that to ask first, tell second. I may have in mind, if I were in your shoes doing A, B, C, and D, but if I practice the ask first, tell second, say, Daniel, I've got some thoughts, but what have you thought of so far? You're likely to say something like, well, I think I should do A, B, D, and E. Now, I've got a great opportunity as a leader to say, Daniel, I think A, B, and D are spot on. Hadn't thought about E. I think it's a great idea. Only thing I'd add is I'd suggest that you do C as well. Now, you're going to go away much more highly motivated because you're implementing your ideas that I reinforced and added to. And I think what totally inadvertently so many leaders do with that tell first, ask second is they're not aware that the employee may walk away with some form of, and I'm going to make it a little bit more dramatic than it needs to be, but they may walk away saying, oh, geez, I thought about A, B, and D. I didn't think about C. I'm not even going to bring E up because he's going to tell me why it won't work, which is a victim way of looking at the interaction.
Okay, so you have to ask them first, but then being the challenger, how do you challenge them correctly? What kind of questions can you do to challenge them to stop seeing it as a problem and see it as a challenge, and just walk them through that?
Sure, there's a couple things to keep in mind. One is that there's a very important underlying question to the challenger role, which is in the empowerment dynamic, which is the challengers call forth learning and growth. And so the underlying question is, what's my intention behind challenging? If my intention is to be right, to be on top, to look good, then I'm probably going to land as a persecutor to the person. But if my underlying intention is to foster learning and growth, to encourage the other to stretch, to reinforce their ability to learn what they need to learn, to be successful in what they're being asked to be successful, then as a challenger, the important distinction between challengers is challengers tend to make statements, coaches ask questions, and a lot of times those questions can be challenging questions. So as a challenger, I might say something like, Daniel, I know that this is going to stretch you, and I know that you're up for this. I see it in you, and so you're coming to me with a problem. Let's step back and ask the question, what's the outcome that you really want? Why is this problem important to you or important to us in the organization? And what does the problem stand in the way of that we want to create, the outcome that we want to create? And let's uncover that rather than just reacting to the presenting problem. Let's uncover what it is that problem stands in relation to and focus on that outcome, and then bring the problem solving skills and tools and techniques to solving the problem. So this is not denying the problems exist, but all too often what happens is that, the victim mindset is a mindset that's problem focused, that's anxiety or fear based and reactive in nature. And so if we're just reacting to the next incoming problem, we're not stopping to ask that question of what is it that we really want and what is the outcome that we want to create. And that's what great leaders do, is they focus on creating outcomes and then bring problem solving to that generation or generating of the outcome that they want to create.
Before I go to the three vital questions, let me ask a question before to finish this. So every time I teach this to CEOs I'm coaching, they say it's impossible, I don't have time. If I sit down and challenge them and ask them to think, and it will take me 3 or 4 times more, I don't have time. So what do you tell to a VC executive that has a bunch of victims working for them and they're already saturated answering the victims and telling victims what to do?
Well, that's an interesting question. And I think if I were in the coaching role with that executive, I would, and I don't mean this cynically, I'd ask how things are going for them. and what kind of pressures they're under. Because what happens is, again, totally inadvertently, that kind of CEO is probably producing and perpetuating the process of employees inherently, they may not be consciously saying this, but saying to themselves, I don't really need to think for myself because boss will tell me what to do. And by the way, if what boss tells me to do doesn't work, it's not my fault.
That's right.
Right. And so what I would say, what I would encourage the CEO to do is to take a longer view. And I'm going to go back to the ask first, tell second. It actually doesn't take very much longer to ask the person coming with the problem what they've thought about and adding to their thoughts. But if you've created a dependency on yourself as the leader to have the answers, then the burdens are all on your shoulders. And that's not sustainable.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. All right, let's go to the 3 vital questions to transform workplace drama. What are the questions and why you wrote the second book?
Sure. Well, one of the reasons why I wrote the second book is that a big part of my background is actually in organizational leadership and development. And it's kind of my sweet spot in terms of context. And I had one of the things that was fascinating to me, credit Stegan for a lot of this, is that Rand Stegan and the Stegan Leadership Academy, is that the power of TED was really taking off in organizations, and people were asking me, how do we actually implement this more in the organizational context? So in our conversation, Daniel, I've already alluded to aspects of the 3 vital questions, so I can go through this actually fairly quickly. So the first of the 3 vital questions is, where are you putting your focus? Are you focusing on problems? Or are you focusing on outcomes? And the problem-focused mindset, which I already verbally described, is being problem-focused, anxiety-based, and reactive in nature. Whereas the outcome creator mindset is outcome-focused, and what's important is that the outcome has to be something that one cares about. And if one cares about it, the inner state is passion-based, because I want to see that outcome come to fruition. And then the behavior or the action is taking the baby steps that are going to help move toward and bring that outcome to fruition over time. So 2 very different mindsets are contained in that first vital question of where are you putting your focus. Where you put your focus sets up the second vital question, which is, how are you relating? How are you relating to others? How are you relating to your experience? And how are you relating to yourself? And are you relating in ways that produce or perpetuate drama? Or are you relating in ways that empower others and yourself to be more resourceful, resilient, and innovative? So the problem-focused, and what I eventually called victim orientation, that problem-focused, anxiety-based, reactive mindset creates the kinds of environmental conditions in an organization, in a team, that produces and perpetuates drama and that interplay between the victim, persecutor, rescuer. Whereas if one can pause and shift their mindset focus to outcomes that they care about, that creates the kind of organizational environment in which the TED, the empowerment dynamic roles, can be cultivated of being co-creators, of challengers from a learning intent, and coaches asking questions to help clarify and to think through things. So mindset leads to relationship dynamics. And then the third vital question is, what actions are you taking? And are you merely reacting to the problem of the moment? Or are you taking creative and generative action in service to outcomes, including the solving of problems? And so that gets into won't go deeply into it, but an action planning process around really anchoring on outcomes, paying attention to current reality, and then committing to and taking baby steps to create those outcomes over time. So those are the 3 vital questions: focus, relating, and actions.
Right. And so when you're coaching someone, you have to change their focus first. Then you walk them through all the options, and then you ask them to get the steps or what they're going to do next coming out.
Right. You bet. That's it.
All right. So let me go back to the leader. We already kind of talked, if you're the leader and you have a victim as an employee, but what happens if the organization leaders are victims? And we're seeing that a lot. We're seeing a lot of young people that go to the C-suite very fast because they're great operators, but they just don't know how to act, and all these soft skills that they should have to get to a C-suite. They go so fast to a C-suite, they have no idea how to manage them and what kind of thing. So what happens when you come to an organization and you get in the leadership? They have a lot of this mentality. What do you do?
Well, a couple things come to mind. But first of all, you mentioned the soft stuff. One of my favorite quotes of all time comes from Roger Enrico, the late Roger Enrico, who was the CEO of PepsiCo back in the 90s. And he made the observation, he said, look, you give me a reasonably intelligent man or woman, we can teach them the hard stuff of business. We can teach them the budgeting, et cetera, et cetera. He said, when it comes to leadership, it's the soft stuff that's hard. And it's the soft stuff that often derails someone in their career. So I want to start with that. And so I think that, so when someone is, this is going to be a little bit one off from your question, but I think it's really important here, is that if someone is showing up in a victim role, and I need to acknowledge, Daniel, that we all experience victimization from time to time.
All the time.
We all feel victimized. And so it's part of the human condition. And just because I teach this stuff doesn't mean that it's a lifelong practice. But here's what I've learned. If someone is showing up as a victim, two things. One is the worst thing you can do is just say, Daniel, you're being a victim, because that's weaponizing it. And you're going to see me as a persecutor.
Yeah.
So it's about being able to be empathetic and from the cultural, asking a question that can help them or at least invite them to shift. So let's say you come to me and it's clear that you're feeling victimized. I might say something like, boy, Daniel, I really get your frustration, or fill in I really get your anger. And I really see what you're up against. What's one baby step I might use, or what's one thing that you could do to move from how you're feeling into a more productive space that is focused on the outcome that you really care about. So that's one thing that comes to mind. One of the most predominant forms of someone being in the victim role is complaining.
Yep.
And one of the phrases that comes from Robert Keegan and Lisa Leahy from Harvard's School of Education that I think is just brilliant is they make the observation that behind every complaint lies a commitment. Behind every complaint lies a commitment. And so so do we complain about things we don't care about? No. So if someone's complaining, again, empathetically being able to feed back, boy, I really get that that respect between people is really important to you. So again, to speak to what's behind that complaint, which is an invitation to shift the focus to how do we create more respect, or whatever the context is.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Wow, you kind of got me off guard with that.
Sorry about that.
It's fine. When you were saying this, I just came this week and I spent a couple of days with a mentor, and he has this thing on the wall that says, "Nothing must be done," and that's something that as CEOs we said, "No, I have to do something." No, nothing must be done. You could choose to do nothing, and that's one more option. And we believe we have to, and we have to do this, and that's when we get in all this victim mentality, because we believe that we have to act in some way, or at least act, and we don't necessarily.
Right. So again, when people are in the victim role, their assumption is that they have no choice.
Yeah.
As a creator, we are always at choice.
Yeah.
So we can choose to do nothing. We can choose to do something. We can choose to delegate. We can, and so it's funny that you should bring this up, because I was having a conversation with one of my colleagues, and he told a story that his young daughter had just started preschool, and that one of the things that they were trying to teach the young daughter is this notion of choosing. And she came back from preschool and she said, I have to this, or I have to do this, or I have to. And he was like, no, you don't have to. And if you choose not to, what would the consequences of choosing not to end up being?
Yeah.
But you're still a choice.
That is choice. What to do. All right. So let me close this with this. Now let's look to the future. You're an expert on workplace drama and everything that is happening today. What do you see that is happening, or what do you foresee happening in the future, and how to prepare, or how can we, like, the way that we work is changing dramatically. COVID
Sure
was not the change, it was just the accelerator.
Right.
But the way we work is dramatically different. And we're having all these CEOs saying, you have to come back to the office, and doing all these mandate. And I was having a conversation with a CEO. Imagine being Apple, that you invest like $2 billion in an amazing office. And the day you finish the office, you get COVID and no one wants to go back to the office. Imagine how difficult will that be. So what are you seeing that is happening, or what do you foresee happening in the future, or affecting workplace, and how can we prepare better?
Well, I'm going to be two-faced here. I'm going to share my thoughts from a pessimistic standpoint, and I'm going to share my thoughts from an optimistic standpoint. And I think the pessimistic standpoint is that there are going to be more and more occasions for drama, and so as we are having this conversation and recording this conversation, Elon Musk is doing what he's doing at Twitter, and I think that's a great case study of a leader who is demanding, who is producing and perpetuating a lot of drama. And so the pessimist in me says, if that's the way that leaders, CEOs are going to try to get things done, they are going to experience more and more drama. Here's a quick statistic that I think bears this out, is that this came from a Forbes article years ago, but that it's estimated that leaders, managers spend up to 40% of their time dealing with drama, the types of drama we talked about. And if you think about just the traditional 40-hour work week, and you apply that to 40%, that's 2 days a week that managers are dealing with drama. Yeah. And so I'm going to use that statistic to shift to a more optimistic standpoint. And that is, we're human beings, so there's always going to be some level of drama. But if we could reduce that by 50%, and to redirect that time and energy and focus to clients, customers, co-workers, stakeholders, what that would unleash in terms of positive environments, co-creative environments. I think that the way that the pessimist and the optimistic come together is that I think we are really seeing the breakdown of old ways of doing things, and that I'm optimistic of what can emerge in empowered and empowering environments.
Love it, love it. One thing, we are going to be remote, or with a significant part of our team remote. What kind of leadership, how can we have to evolve our leadership to be able to deal with this better? And by the way, I don't think we're ever going to go back to the office the way we used to. I think, and by the way, I don't want to go back, and most of my teams don't want to go back. So what kind of leadership traits or things we have to get better as leaders to be able to deal with this kind of new environment?
Well, I'm going to come back to the mindsets, and I think that leaders need to be outcome focused. They need to be passion based, and they need to be comfortable with taking baby steps. in creating outcomes. And so I think clarity of outcomes, negotiating outcomes, being clear about, and when I talk about an outcome, sometimes an outcome is really clear and concrete, and sometimes it's more vague and directional, that we want to be, we want to be an innovator in our market. That would be, but then being able to, as things come up, is that being able to ask the question, it's kind of a coach role, is what we're considering here is how does that relate to the outcome of being the innovator in our marketplace? Will help us get closer to that, then let's take that on. If it's not really related to that, let's, parking lot, or let's, put it on the back burner. So I think leaders, to be effective, need to be really clear about communicating and co-creating outcomes, and then empowering the employees to go after and to be, through coaching and challenging, helping them raise their game, whether it's remote or whether it's a day a week in the office. But I have to agree with you that the old ways, one thing that just occurred to me I've not thought about before is that, I was a big fan back when I was leading executive education at the old Bank One of, the managing by walking around. Well, if we're working remote, we can't manage by walking around. So it's finding ways of checking in with people to see how things are going, and to be able to ask as a leader, what do you need from me for you to be successful?
Love it. David, I'll say, I will close with how I started. I'm a big fan. You gave a lot of structure to the way I lead. I learned your program first at Stegen. Brett Thomas was my coach. We deal with it a lot. And Brett was really open and strong with me. I have to take decision. I have to do all these things, and I have to tell my team members what to do. And you were like, no, you don't have to. You have to ask them. But they don't know. They're millennials. They're young. They're whatever. They don't have experience. You don't have to. It's part of being how to be a better leader.
And Brett is both a coach and a challenger. I know that about him.
Yes, it is. He is. He's been a good friend since he coached me. Now we just did a course together, and he has walked through a lot of things that really has changed my life. And one of the things that I learned from him was your book and your model, and it changed the way I lead my teams. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Damon.
Right.
Great conversation.
David, great conversation. It's always a pleasure. I'll send you some follow-up emails of the things that we discussed at the beginning, and look forward to share more of your content and your brilliant tools with the world. Thank you for that.
Great. Thank you. Here's to the creator in you, Daniel. Bye-bye.
Thank you.